Let me ask you something, and I want you to really think about this before you answer. If someone told you today that the country producing the world's happiest, healthiest, and most cognitively advanced children wasn't spending billions on schools, wasn't investing in tutoring programs, and wasn't handing out IQ supplements, but was simply feeding their children differently, would you believe them? Because I didn't, not at first, until I looked at the data, and what I found completely changed the way I think about raising a child in the modern world. My name is Emma, and this is Parenting IQ. Today we are not talking about eating healthy. We are not talking about vitamin charts or food pyramids. We are going somewhere much deeper than that. Today we are going to Norway. The question nobody is asking. Think about the last time your child had a meltdown at homework time, or the last time they couldn't sit still for more than 5 minutes, or the last time you watched them stare blankly at something they were supposed to be focused on, and you thought to yourself, why can't they just concentrate? Here's what nobody told you. That question is the wrong question. The right question isn't, why can't they focus? The right question is, what are we giving their brain to focus with? Because focus isn't a personality trait. It isn't discipline. It isn't something you teach with a reward chart on your refrigerator. Focus is a biological output. And like every output, it depends entirely on the input. So here is what I need you to ask yourself right now, and drop your honest answer in the comments below, because I read every single one. What did your child eat for breakfast this morning? Because that answer tells me more about their afternoon focus than anything else will. In Norway, Sweden, Finland, the answer to that question looks very different than it does in most of the world, and the results are impossible to ignore. These nations don't just lead global happiness indexes, they don't just dominate economic stability reports, they consistently, year after year, top the world rankings for childhood cognitive performance, literacy rates, and emotional resilience. And the question that elite researchers and elite parents are finally beginning to ask out loud is, why? Is it their schools, their culture, their genes, or is it their food? At Parenting IQ, we looked at the architecture, and what we found is what we call the Nordic Protocol. I want to tell you about a boy who grew up in a small coastal town called Tonsberg, Norway. He wasn't born with any obvious superpower. He didn't have a chess prodigy for a father. He didn't attend some elite cognitive academy. He went to a regular Norwegian school, ate regular Norwegian food, and played outside in temperatures that would send most of us straight back indoors. That boy is Magnus Carlsen, and today he is the greatest chess player in the history of human civilization. Now, before you say, well, he's just talented, I need you to stay with me, because that is exactly the kind of thinking that the Nordic Protocol exists to challenge. Here is the question I want you to sit with. How does a human brain sustain peak mathematical calculation for 6, 7, sometimes 8 hours straight in complete, unbroken focus while the world-class opponent sitting across the table slowly falls apart? That is not talent. Talent runs out. Talent gets tired. What Magnus Carlsen has is something the neuroscience community calls neural endurance, and it isn't something he was born with, it is something that was built at a dining table in Norway before he ever touched a chess piece. Here is what Magnus Carlsen's childhood table looked like while children across the Atlantic were starting their mornings with sugary cereals, processed juice boxes, and refined carbohydrates that spiked their blood sugar and sent it crashing before second period even started. Magnus was eating wild fatty fish, cold water mackerel, herring, fermented cod liver oil that most Western children would turn their nose up at. He was eating wild Nordic bilberries, not the large, watery supermarket blueberries we know, but small, intensely pigmented, nutrient-dense wild berries that grow in sub-zero temperatures and produce compounds so powerful they literally cross into the brain itself. And he wasn't spending hours outside in the cold Norwegian air, running, climbing, breathing, in a philosophy Norwegians call the Friluftsliv, the open-air life. His parents weren't following a neuroscience manual, they were following something more powerful, a generational cultural wisdom so deeply embedded in Norwegian life that it required no conscious decision. And that wisdom was quietly building a brain that the world had never seen before. By the time Magnus Carlsen was 5 years old, his brain wasn't just learning chess. His brain had developed the physical infrastructure, the neural density, the synaptic speed, the myelinated pathways to process information at a biological frequency his peers simply couldn't match. He wasn't just smarter. He was built differently. And here's the part that should stop you in your tracks. That same blueprint is available to your child, starting tomorrow. Tell me something in the comments. Did you grow up eating fish regularly? Do your kids eat it now? Because what you're about to hear might completely change your answer. The science behind the shield. Let me show you exactly what is happening inside a Nordic child's brain, because once you see this, you cannot unsee it. It starts with something called stress response nutrition. Here is the concept in one sentence. The harder a plant has to fight to survive, the more powerful the compound it produces. Think about that for a moment. The wild Nordic bilberry doesn't grow in warm, comfortable, sunny conditions like commercial blueberries do. It grows in sub-zero temperatures, thin soil, brutal sunlight cycles. To survive that kind of biological stress, the bilberry produces one of the highest concentrations of anthocyanins found anywhere in the natural world. Anthocyanins are antioxidants, but calling them antioxidants is like calling the Eiffel Tower a metal structure. Technically accurate, dramatically underselling the reality. Here is what anthocyanins actually do inside your child's brain. They cross the blood-brain barrier, one of the most selective biological filters in the human body. Not many compounds can do this. These can. Once inside, they do two things. First, they measurably increase blood flow to the prefrontal cortex. That is the region of the brain responsible for decision-making, emotional regulation, focus, and what psychologists call executive function. The part of the brain that determines whether your child handles a frustrating moment with composure or a meltdown. And second, they protect the brain's delicate neural tissue from what neuroscientists call oxidative stress. Think of it as biological rust. It accumulates silently, dulling cognitive sharpness, accelerating mental fatigue, and making focus feel like an impossible task. In a world where our children are the most screen-exposed generation in history, this protection isn't optional, it is a survival mechanism. But the bilberry is only half the story. The second layer of the Nordic shield is what researchers call the deep sea load. Norway, Sweden, and Finland consume more wild-caught, cold-water fish per capita than almost any other nation on Earth. Mackerel, herring, cod, sardines. These fish are extraordinarily dense with DHA and EPA, the long-chain omega-3 fatty acids that your child's brain is quite literally made of. Let me give you the analogy that made this click for me, and I want you to tell me in the comments if this helps you understand it too. Imagine your child's brain as a vast city of electrical wires, billions of them, running in every direction. Now, every single wire needs insulation. Without insulation, the electrical signal leaks, it degrades, it arrives late, distorted, or not at all. That insulation is called the myelin sheath, and it is constructed almost entirely from one source, dietary fat, the right kind of dietary fat. DHA and EPA are the raw materials for myelin. When a child receives consistent, high-quality DHA during their brain's critical development window, the myelin becomes thick, efficient, and fast. Neural signals travel cleanly, information is processed rapidly, the child thinks faster, stays calmer under pressure, and sustains focus for longer periods. When DHA is absent, the insulation thins, the signal leaks, and the child who could have been processing information at scale spends his life perpetually catching up. Research consistently shows measurably superior neural processing in populations with high DHA intake from infancy compared to populations on low-fat, processed food diets. This is not a small difference. This is the biological gap between a child who leads and a child who struggles to keep up. Now, here is my question for you, and I genuinely want to know, did anyone ever tell you this when your child was born? Because nobody told me either. The 3 pillars. Your protocol starts here. So